Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Joining me today is Yogi Chugh as we look forward to how Trump 2.0 is going to be influencing the Indo-United States relations. I'm pausing because there is so much that is going to happen in the next couple of days. By the time you see this video, Modi's visit may have already started, but don't worry. We are going to cover back and forth, so it's not going to be just one visit type stuff.
That's right.
Yogi, question for you is that before we talk about Modi coming and visiting Trump,
Right.
the big 800-pound gorilla here is the USAID's role in trying to set up the narrative in and around what has happened in India. For example, I'll tell you, between 2021 and 2024, 6.5 billion has been spent by USAID in India. And I just did a program and talked about all the different people who have got it, and it's just mind-blowing. What was this money spent for? And how can one explain, this is all my taxpayer money, this is your taxpayer money, your dad's taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Tell me something, I mean, what exactly was the objective?
Well, let's look at USAID over the last 40 years. It was designed to protect America's interests in the world. And as a part of that, it was a vital tool of statecraft. It was how do you go into communities to come back and often show the generosity of America so that as a people who are living in our country and are seeing turmoil, they see America as a great partner. It's this whole idea of how America is perceived. It's how do you help vulnerable parts of the world to elevate themselves out of poverty, to build allies in the world. So let's not bastardize USAID's role in the world. But where have some of these contributions evolved over time under certain presidencies is probably the bigger question.
Actually, I'm going to stop you just for one moment because many Indians may not know this thing. We all talk about the food revolution that took place in India. Do you know how that came about? It came about because of a Rockefeller grant. And that grant not only gave the money to India, but they identified the right strains of rice, wheat, all the other crops that you grow in India, said use these.
So at that time, USAID was a formidable resource in order to help India get to a certain point where India is where it is today. So there are certain things that USAID has done over the years. I will be passionate about the defense of USAID when I come back and say it is intended to protect the interest of America. It's a vital tool in statecraft. Diplomacy takes life of many forms, and you really have to come back and be at the cutting edge of making sure that you're in a country. Where I have a fundamental problem is when USAID ends to become a concept of propelling your societal views or your social morals or what life must become, what must be tolerated, what must be accepted. That's where I draw a line. I think countries dictate themselves to the masses, and that drives whatever shift India takes as a nation. That's fine. I draw offense to the fact when somebody will come back and say, well, let's go and try to perpetuate a media narrative. Let's try to perpetuate what's happening in India as anything but normal. I have an issue with somebody going in to any part of the world for that matter, but I'll speak specifically about India. They should never come back and put money for things like this, such as, okay, let's just come back and look at, hey, is media being less biased or not? No, I have a problem with that. I think what we should do is nurture alternative media to offset that so people can get their news and determine their facts, right? In many ways, how X has now become the de facto tool where we first go to understand what's happening in America today, right? But that's the issue that I see where USAID began to impact its values. See, India is one of the greatest experiments in democracy. 75 years to see where we came from a colonial nation to where we are today. Prime ministers and prime ministers have come and gone, and every one of them has seized the moment to do what they thought was best at that moment in time. Prime Minister Modi has now catapulted India to a point that it is now seen as a formidable player. When you become stronger, so do your adversaries. So activism in India goes on to a certain point. When money is inserted to come back and help a certain narrative, that's the problem. When waste is being done at the expense of American taxpayers, it's a problem. If you want to come back and have USAID go into Ukraine to come back and say, hey, how do we perfect the rare earths and the critical minerals to bring it back to the United States, that would be good use. A country that's being savaged, a country that is at the net effect of $120 billion that's being done to ward off Putin, well, USAID would be seen as being in good use. But if they were to go to USAID to build propaganda against Putin, one could make the argument that you don't think the media in Ukraine today is going to be saying bad stuff about Putin anyway? Why do we have to do these experiments because somebody believes that contractors and consultants must be sent in? That's the problem. If they want to build a network of activists, well, this is how you activate and this is how you do it, I'd be okay with that if they go and teach people. But I would have a problem if they come back and tell them, here's how you advocate in a community, but here's what you need to advocate at the same time. You see the difference? Democracies need help sometimes. Priorities shift. Priorities happen. You focus on this. If USAID can go and teach our farmers how to take geospatial data and augment that with the use of clean fertilizers, while our startups in India are beginning to just learn how to do this themselves, till we shoot our own rockets in the sky, right? We're buying extreme expensive data, which we may or may not be able to focus on because that's not our priority today as we're skilling our workers. But if USAID were to come back and say, we'll give you geospatial data and we'll give you $100 million to do this, I think everybody in India will applaud that. I don't care if George Soros did that for a moment. But if he comes back and starts to say that the doctrine of India and we have to come back and fundamentally shift the discourse in India because India is tending to have nationalistic overtures, I take offense to that. You know when countries become nationalist? When they feel that their needs are not being taken care of and they're being left behind. It is a sure shot recipe of getting everybody to become a nationalist when you feel that you're being left behind at the altar. So why is the world seeing a rise in nationalism? US first, India first, and Meloni in Italy. She's taking a fight with all over Europe. But why is she admired and appreciated in the world? Because she's coming back and saying the needs of my country will come first. You close the borders. Why did open borders become an issue of late? Why are countries saying we have to have a free and open border? What, we can't find enough cooks for our restaurants? That's where the issue around this whole geopolitics happens, where USAID gets bastardized. I would tell your listeners that if USAID came back to uplift a country, it would be okay. Where we should draw the line is to come back and say, what the hell are you doing trying to tell me how to change my way of life and my way of thinking? You know, it's not an anomaly that a lot of these Christian churches have also been funded over the years. If they were to fund and say, we want to ensure that Christians in India are able to come back and practice their faith, that's fine. But don't come back and try to change the narrative that Christians in India are under attack. That's wrong. People of India have been a very secular nation. I think the people of India are very reasonable and very good-hearted, good-intentioned people. I think it's the narrative that people often espouse for their own political rhetoric. You know, I see a lot of these politicians in India attack Prime Minister Modi's government. I don't believe that there is a concerted effort to do anything. I think the goal is let's uplift everybody, and there's different political leanings, right? Supply side economics in the US, a trickle down that we have in the US. Same thing in India. As the opportunity arises, as our state-owned enterprises become publicly traded, more capital comes into those factories, it's going to hire more workers. The factories of the future. So why attack aspirations of a nation when you have no ability to have an impact? The people of India will either adore Prime Minister Modi or fourth term, they may or may not get him elected if he ever decides to run, which I don't think he will, but who knows, right? But I'm just saying that USAID should not be seen as a puppeteer. It should be seen as a force of good.
So, given that
it's long-worded, but I hope the listeners get a better appreciation for what USAID does.
Because this is probably going to be one of the pushbacks that Modi will give, because Trump is, again, going to try and do shock and awe. Right. He's going to say something to Modi, which could even be in an open press conference where something just comes from the left field, and Modi is going to be like, oops, I didn't know that. or something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Personally, just my perspective, I think Trump has a tremendous amount of respect for Prime Minister Modi. I think they generally have a warm
Good
relationship.
chemistry.
Even when President Trump went to Gujarat and went to India, I think it generally showed this relationship, even at Howdy Modi. I think there's a general warmth. I think he's also very sensitive to the nuances of the role that Prime Minister Modi has to deal with. Remember, it's a region that's surrounded by the China hegemon.
Yeah.
We've had a nameless but a faceless adversary, Pakistan, who has been, its entire existence has been at the generosity of the United States, who needed access to go to Afghanistan. India is sitting in this whole region of water, and then you got Mauritius and Seychelles, and you got this whole idea of passageways in water, similar to the Panama Canal in the United States, right? We have USAID, and China has its own Silk Route Initiative, or whatever they're called. They're giving to different nations to build goodwill, right? So the complexity of this really makes the US-India partnership very, very strong. I think President Trump looks at Prime Minister Modi as a reliable, a steady, a very consequential partner in that region. I also believe, Prime Minister Modi should be very clear that President Trump is America first. But as I said before, he will never tell Prime Minister Modi that you can't be for India first. That would be political malpractice, even for a person like Trump, who's shock and awe, right? But what he will say is, I may or may not need you for the end of the Ukraine and the Russia war. I can do it myself. I may not need you for Gaza and Palestine and Israel, but I do think that you need to be able to nurture the relationships that you've had with the African nations in the G20 and solidify that. I likely will support you to be on the Security Council for India, long overdue. And I think he's also going to come back and say, I want to make sure that some of your largest industrial houses in India are going to come and build factories in the United States. I think it's okay. It's not by chance that the Ambanis showed up at the inauguration.
Yep.
Tariffs? Some tariffs may be okay, and India may come back and say, for too long we had a good ride, right? Why can't we allow Harley-Davidson to sell bikes and while coexisting with our manufacturers of motorcycles and mopeds in India? So Sree, the conversation is that I think it's a relationship of respect and trust, but I think we're going to find the biggest agreement or disagreement is how do we end these tariffs in a way that doesn't cause economic turmoil in India. And I think Trump will say that, having Prime Minister Modi as an ally in India is better for his interest than having somebody that nobody even knows who that would be. So I think this meeting is going to go all right, in my judgment.
Well, we will see, because this is going to air just before Modi meets Trump.
Right.
So we will know whether how our conversation or guess on how this is going to play out, how it actually plays out in real life. So thank you so much, Yogi. Viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And give us your feedback by way of comments. Yogi would love to know what you think about these conversations that we are having. This is a series of talks because I'd like to continue this on a regular basis where Yogi and I sit down and talk about various things. And as you can see, Yogi is very articulate. And he knows a lot more than what he's letting on, and I like it that way, because then there is more in the tank for the next conversation and the next one and so on. Thank you once again.
Thank you.